Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Fork in the Road. I'm your host, Paul Pastora. And today we're going to be doing a very special episode where we're going to be doing a summary of an extremely important congressional hearing that happened yesterday, which was Monday. And I think a lot of people are overlooking it because sometimes, these congressional hearings can be 2 hours long, and hey, who has that much time? So I wanted to help anyone out with doing a shorter version of it with what I thought were the most important parts in it. So I'll just give you a brief introduction of who we're about to see. Five representatives of the House basically came together to do this hearing. It was Andy Biggs, Arizona's 5th District Representative, Eli Crane from Arizona's 2nd District, Matt Gaetz from Florida's 1st District, Corey Mills from Florida's 7th District, Chip Roy from Texas's 21st District, and they have on their panel three experts, which are Ben Schaefer, who was a CEO SWAT sniper who was there the day of the Trump assassination attempt. We have Eric Prince, who is the CEO of Blackwater, who is a wealth of information with protecting people in international hostile environments. And Dan Bongino, who is a man who really requires no introduction at all. He is the former Secret Service agent. He was on the personal detail of Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and also has the most successful current broadcasting podcast, which you can find on Rumble, in conservative media, and definitely someone I recommend that you follow for very good information. As far as this, let's get right into it. Let me do a quick. I'm gonna take myself off here. Okay, let's go here. Okay, and we're gonna get right into it. I've clipped a lot of pieces of the hearing so that to your benefit, and let's get it started.
Well, thanks for your time. Thank you for doing this. Sound okay? Everybody hear me back there? Yeah. Great. Fantastic. Listen, let's just get right to the point. This was an apocalyptic security failure. A man was murdered in front of his family. 3 people were shot on live television, including President Trump, and the head who came within 2 millimeters of having his head explode on national television in front of millions of people. There's no sugarcoating it. It's no time for BS. Unfortunately, as Congressman Crane and Mills both indicated, the story seems to have been vanquished to the phantom zone of media coverage. It's amazing how we're still talking about JFK's assassination, but nobody seems to want to talk about President Trump being shot in the head on national television, despite the fact that we have no answers. So I have 5 minutes, so I want to keep it quick, and I want to make 3 points. I worked in the Secret Service for 12 years. I loved it. I worked with some really amazing men and women who gave everything. I mean, a couple of them literally gave everything. I know guys who've gotten bizarre diseases overseas, like chikungunya fever and protection operations. Everybody gave a little bit of something in the Secret Service, and it was a real honor to say I was part of it.
Okay.
And the attention they deserve. With that, I'll turn it over.
It'll replay, so a couple. All right, let's continue with Dan's testimonies here.
Apocalyptic failure won't happen again. First, they have a technology problem. The joke in the Secret Service, which is just sadly no longer funny when I was there, and it wasn't funny then either, is they rely on yesterday's technology tomorrow. Think about that. Yesterday's technology tomorrow. Everything from computer systems at waste agents' times, filling out time and attendance records they were doing, to Congressman Crane and I discussing the fact that they only implemented slings, a technology as old as the wheel, about, 5 or 6 years into my time in the Secret Service, which is embarrassing. The weaponry was old. Everything was old. These are things I would have talked about sooner if they didn't create a security crisis, and I obviously didn't want to air them publicly. Now you're seeing what happens when you don't have a drone up at a site you could have bought for $39.99 on Amazon. Second,
Okay.
apocalyptic failure won't happen again.
First, All right, moving on. Dan continues.
99 on Amazon. Second, another adage in the Secret Service, you've heard even the new acting director discuss, is the more with less approach. There is no more with less. There's less with less, okay? The Secret Service more with less approach only works if you produce more. That's how capitalism works. You produce a flat screen TV that was probably 20 years ago, $10,000. It's $200 at Walmart now. They produce a better TV with less. That's not what the Secret Service did. They produced less with more. They were given more money and produced less. a 20-year-old criminal outsmarted them on a $40 drone technology piece of device. You're telling me that's more with less? It's disgusting. That's nothing with less. That's less with more. Their budget went up. You guys know, you're appropriators. You know that.
Okay.
99 on Amazon. Second, another.
It's like when I take it off of full screen, it starts to replay it. So let's get on. Now that's a little introduction that Dan Bongino gave. I went ahead and fast forwarded just a little bit to the introduction of Ben Schaefer. He was the sniper who was on site. He was there. He was one of the snipers. He did not have a line of sight. I don't think I put that part in. He did not take the shot, but obviously he works with the other snipers and all the local law enforcement that was there that day.
Good morning. My name is Ben Schaefer. I'm a SWAT operator with Washington Regional SWAT Team. It was tasked for presidential support on that day. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here today as you examine the assassination attempt on former President Donald J. Trump in Butler, PA. Before I begin, I feel compelled to also echo those condolences for all the victims that suffered that day and continue to suffer because of those tragedies. Since joining the Marine Corps in 2004, I have deployed, fought, and been recognized for exemplary service and performance in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I've provided security services to the President of the United States and other high-ranking members in the United States government. I've protected diplomatic persons, high-net-worth corporate clients, media personalities, investigative journalists, and the general public. I continue that work today as a SWAT team leader and executive protection specialist. I have been recognized on numerous occasions for my high level of professionalism, proficiency, and knowledge of all security measures while working in those fields. As I analyze what happened in hindsight and real time on July 13th, there's a few points that I'd like to talk or mention that haven't sat well with me or I haven't been able to reason. Part of that is in the communication conversation of what happened that day and the abilities or lack thereof. The ability to communicate quicker between agencies is definitely a shortfall. That was not optimized in what we'd normally see in a presidential support mission. This all led to an obvious delay in communication when we were beginning to target and respond to the threat that was Mr. Crooks that day. The lack of coordination between tactical element leaders in the Secret Service left ground elements in the dark and prevented necessary time to prepare for specific venue considerations and needs prior to that event. All Overwatch, sniper, counter-sniper positions should have had direct communication with each other that day at that entire rally. Some of the technical difficulties that have already been mentioned that I'd like to echo is the lack of drone coverage or drone overwatch that day, which left many danger areas exposed and severely, and I say that again, severely, impacted the ability to secure the venue and the event itself. Other points of failure, other danger areas that have been noted, and I feel the need again to echo those, is the water tower that was located in the northeast section of the event. That's a major, if not catastrophic failure to not identify that that is a elevated, optimal, and opportunistic place for anyone with any kind of knowledge to wreak havoc on that event.
Yeah, so as we know, the water tower has been a big issue, and I think he lets you know right there. I mean, just the fact that we didn't have a counter sniper on that water tower that had a lot of coverage in the area, it's a little mind-boggling. All right, we're gonna go where he asks. This is, I believe, Representative Biggs, and he's asking him about, well, wasn't there a command center? And he explains where the lack of communication was with that.
Let's talk about the communications. let's start there. Was there a central communications center in place?
Yes, there were. That was provided by the Butler Emergency Services Unit.
And typically, was the Secret Service? Did they have a person on the scene, a decision maker on the scene in case an emergency happened?
I believe that there were a Secret Service agent responsible for the scene. However, they were not, to my knowledge, co-located at the command center itself.
And so I want to make clear. So who was present in the communications command center that might have made decisions for Secret Service?
Secret Service, on my understanding, is that the information that was gathered by the command center, which would have been being operated by the Butler Emergency Services Unit and the commander in that capacity, he was responsible for relaying that information to a point of contact he had, and my understanding was that it was over a cell phone as opposed to in-person communications.
Is that normal to have a cell phone communication, or is there usually a body there that can make a decision?
In most security postures and events that I've been part of for these types of events, there is someone actually physically co-located for that reason. Due to the loss of cell phone service, which we experienced that day, a possible loss of radio communications that day. It's a very robust and fail-proof way to communicate because of the level of importance that's needed.
Let's put it this way. Were radios and communication implements offered to Secret Service by the local operators?
They were, yes.
And what was the form of the communication?
The form of communication would have been some type of encrypted law enforcement style radio.
And do you know, did the Secret Service avail themselves of that? Did they obtain those radios?
I believe they were offered, but I do not believe they were taken.
So they did not utilize the preferred mechanisms of communication that was offered to them.
That's correct.
Yeah. So the Secret Service was offered radio communications in case there's bad cell phone service. Why would you use cell phones in an open field like that? And according to that testimony right there, they refused a clear channel, and nobody was present in the command center that represented the Secret Service, which seems to have been what led to the communication breakdown, where it's a lot of people online you're going to see where they say, well, people knew about the photo about an hour in advance and, minutes before and all this. Well, if there's no one in the command center to get that information to Secret Service quickly, then that could be a problem.
Mr. Bongino, I want to turn to you real quick. As somebody with a lot of experience in the Secret Service, is it correct, sir, that you at this point have members of the Secret Service whistleblowing and calling you right now to talk to you about the culture of the Secret Service?
There are so many. It's getting to the point now where I thank them and say, but I've already heard that from 10 other guys. And I bring that up because none of these problems are new. Anybody telling you that is lying directly to your face, and you better hope they're not under oath. Anyone is suggesting in a congressional hearing or elsewhere that these problems are new, the personnel problems, the logistics problems, the manpower problems, the technology problems. I just told you a sad running joke in the service when I was there. I'm gone since 2011. Last time I checked, it's 2024. It was yesterday's technology tomorrow. And other things here that are inexcusable that have been brought up before, like Ben and Eric just brought up. The communication failures are basic. This isn't like the Secret Service $1 million radio system that uses NSA-level encryption magically broke down that day. They literally handed them a radio they didn't take. This is why when Congressman Mills says, borderline criminal negligence, you should take that seriously. What could possibly be your excuse to say, you know what, I don't really need to communicate with the law enforcement guys out there on the scene. We asked to, they had no obligation to be there. It's a Secret Service's job to protect the president. Out of courtesy, they showed up. And you don't even have the respect of these local law enforcement people, respect for them to take the radio? I mean, where was the CP, the command post? The way this works, so everybody understands, or it's supposed to and didn't that day, for reasons still unexplained outside of, again, obscene negligence, any trip for a high-level protectee, you're supposed to have a command post that runs the whole trip at the airport or whatever. They'll communicate with everyone. But those individual sites, like in Butler County, have security rooms themselves, which are kind of mini CPs at each site. Where was it? According to what Ben said before, and from what I've heard, it was either not there or the locals were running it, offered communications, and the Secret Service, whose job it was that day to protect President Trump, said, we're going to pass on the comms. Really, you described it as catastrophic. He's 100% correct. Eric knows exactly what he's talking about. Just apocalyptic failure.
Mr. Bond.
Yeah. All right. Well, then we go into, so he mentioned Eric Prince there. For those of you who don't know who Eric Prince is, well then I'd say this next segment is definitely for you.
Start with you, Mr. Prince. I know you have a bit of a public profile, but I'm not sure everybody here understands the depth of your experience here. What was the name of the organization that you founded, sir?
Blackwater.
How many employees did you have at Blackwater when you ended up selling the company?
At peak of about 3,500 Americans deployed, doing everything from very high-end executive security to aviation and training.
3,500. That's it's a pretty large company.
Brigade size.
Yeah. With other protective companies that did executive protection around the world, how did you guys rack and stack? Were you one of the largest companies, one of the smaller companies?
I'd say we were the largest doing that. We never really intended to be in the security business. I started after the SEAL teams and built a training facility. SEAL teams had been using private facilities since the 1970s, and no one had done one on an industrial scale. And started, and then as the demand signal of 2 wars and all the gaps created by trying to take a conventional military into a counterinsurgency created a lot of demand signal, and so we responded by providing a lot of executive security and ended up doing most of the diplomatic security work for almost 10 years.
Yeah. Though there's some similarities between what the Secret Service does and what you had to do overseas, there are definitely some differences.
Sure.
Correct.
In fact, we interacted with the Secret Service whenever the president or some other senior person was coming over. In fact, before we took over security first for Paul Bremer in Iraq, the Secret Service came over to do a study if they wanted to handle it, and they didn't want to touch it at all because they are used to being able to shut down everything and create their own bubble. You can't do that in an active war zone, so that job fell to us, and we grew into that. It was, and that expertise also led us to doing a lot of training for other State Department programs where we'd had at least a dozen countries send their Secret Service equivalents that protected their presidents, and whether that's Lebanon, Colombia, Taiwan, a lot of places with active threats and very active, whether it's Sicarios or Hezbollah, we prepped those units to face that kind of threat. And, we did it, we did 100,000 missions. No one under our care was ever killed or injured.
I want you to repeat that, sir. Did you guys ever lose a protectee?
No, we did not.
Thank you. You said something interesting.
Never lost a protectee in war zones. So basically, their job was to protect people in very dangerous places, and they never lost anyone that they protected. So I think the guy has a pretty valuable opinion when it comes to protecting our leaders. All right. Next, we're gonna some important questions on how the heck does a 20-year-old pull this off against the Secret Service that's funded to the tune of $3 billion a year.
A little bit.
Sure, because the fact that a 20-year-old kid could get his drone in the air, could get himself into a firing position only 140 yards away. 140 yards is point-blank range. My then 12-year-old son could have made that shot. Yep. And thank God that 20-year-old aimed at a headshot at President Trump, Because if he'd aimed center mass, President Trump would probably be dead. Because I don't think he was wearing plates. He wasn't wearing any kind of body armor that would have stopped that rifle round. And a 78-year-old man taking a gunshot wound to the upper chest is not going to go well. A Hezbollah team or ISIS or you name the terrorist organization that actually knows what they're doing would have been successful that day. And the Secret Service was nearly defeated by a 20-year-old, and we all, including Donald Trump, literally dodged a bullet that day.
So I want to double down on that real quick. In your opinion, in your professional opinion, is the Secret Service in its current form and leadership able to stop a threat like that?
President Trump was definitely deprived of resources that day for whatever their political reason. They had 1/3 the amount of agents covering him as were covering Jill Biden in the same region at an indoor event. She had 12 post holders covering her. Again, no statutory or constitutional authority for the First Lady. Donald J. Trump was had 4 Secret Service agents assigned. And I think even when you look at the debacle of a failure of the advance team to actually secure the perimeter and to deny the obvious sniper hotel locations where a bad guy is going to set up from, to the complete lack of coordination and communication, not communicating with the local law enforcement, not taking the radios of local law, come on, to even when shots were fired, the clumsy, unprofessional way of getting the protectee off the X. There was catastrophic failure across the entire enterprise.
Thank you. The 10-man Hezbollah team. Can you?
Okay. All right. Here's an important question. Then they get back to Dan Bongino. Is the Secret Service better today with the new director, Rowe? You need to listen to this.
Big failure.
Mr. Bongino, in your opinion, is the Secret Service in a better spot today with Director Rowe in charge?
No, it's worse. And sadly, I'm glad this is all being recorded, because when something else happens, and I hope it doesn't, I pray to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that I'm wrong. That you play this and go, look, that guy was crazy. You think this is the last incident, you're out of your mind. We have seen these incidents over and over. We saw the Georgia grenade incident with President Bush. They overtook the magnetometers. The Secret Service leadership in charge now with the exact same people. Exact same. Can you imagine a C-suite at a company that makes widgets? We find out that there's a design defect. The widget explodes and kills 10 people, and the CTO gets a promotion to CEO. You understand that's what happened here, correct? These are the same people. Kim Cheadle, the director, wasn't even fired. She was allowed to resign. She'll go get some cushy job somewhere, and her deputy, who is one of the guys behind these stupid waste of time things like agents wearing red ties on the detail. Because this actually happened, by the way. These people will tell you this under oath if you get the right people. He was concerned about the tie color of the agents on the detail because it seemed to imply he supported President Trump. Congressman Biggs wearing a red tie. You're wearing a semi-red tie. It has nothing to do with anything. This is the kind of stuff the Secret Service was actually wasting their time with while withholding CSU.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Big failure.
Mr. Bongino.
Speaks for itself, I would say. So then the question becomes, now that we're starting to get all this, like, well, with all this information coming in, is this malice that we're seeing? This is a longer clip here, so I cut it this way because, you know, hey, I know everybody's busy. If you if you need to pause the video and come back to it, that's why we're doing it this way. This is going to be a 10-minuter here, so a good clip here, really powerful, because this is a very serious question. So, is what we're seeing incompetence, or is this straight malice?
You're one of the people I trust most about global affairs. You're constantly assessing the threat environment and intelligence. And I guess my question to you is, because this has been laid bare and these weaknesses have been exposed, are you concerned that we're likely to face not another Crooks, but perhaps a threat like you described a team from a foreign adversary, a terrorist organization, trying to expose and exploit the weaknesses that now we've seen.
I am very concerned. The inability of the Secret Service or the U.S. government writ large to adjust, to learn a painful lesson from that failure and actually make concrete changes. Because again, the fact that a 20-year-old nearly killed Donald Trump, and the failure to adapt to even yesterday's technology, let alone tomorrow's. And when you see the step change of the ability to deliver precision fires at extended ranges, the lessons being learned on the battlefield of Ukraine, the ability for small units to deliver devastating precision fire onto any target, whether it's the White House, whether it's a motorcade, whether it's a president outside or even inside somewhere, is significant, and I don't think they have any idea what's coming at them.
And what Mr. Bongino seems to have told us is they haven't learned the lesson. He's told us decade after decade we should not expect the lesson to be learned by osmosis. Mr. Bongino, I will have to draw on your experience in protecting folks. I have none, but I do have some experience in observing what a government agency does when they're not telling the truth and they're trying to hide something. And the pattern recognition always goes to some form of scapegoating. We saw it at DOD when people refused the vax, they were scapegoated and driven out. We saw it at FBI when whistleblowers talked about spying at school board meetings and at Catholic churches, they were driven out. And now I take note of the fact that certain people at the Pittsburgh field office have been put on leave. And I've also seen the story change where initially the Secret Service was blaming folks in local government, and then there was admission that there weren't appropriate responses to requests for additional manpower. So what I'd really like to do with you is bring us into that process, because Senator Hawley now has a whistleblower saying there was a manpower request that was coming out of Pittsburgh, and headquarters Secret Service was putting downward pressure on the local agents to try to reduce the intensity of that manpower request. So give Congress a little sense. How does that get developed? And then what should we think about the fact that someone is saying that headquarters was trying to get people to not make requests of enhanced protection?
Well, I can give you an example from personal experience. I saw Senator Hawley's tweet. The Secret Service is going to rely on this and what they're trying to do now, and you're accurate in your analysis about how this cover-up is starting to work. What they're going to say is, well, there was no real formal request made. Here's an example, and then I'll tie something to something that happened to me. Imagine you're working for a company, a public company. It's actual accountability, stock will tank or whatever. You can't make products that'll kill people. You'll go out of business. If you do, there's a penalty. But imagine you're told by your safety guy, you're the CEO, and your chief safety officer says 50 to 60 times, hey, again, this widget has a defect. And if we put this out, it's going to kill someone. And it's clear after the 50th time that the CEO doesn't care. So when the 51st time you tell the product blows up, the CEO's going to say, well, he didn't tell me yesterday. Well, he didn't tell you because he told you 50 times before and you ignored him. So what they're doing now is Ron Rowe, the acting director, who is the deputy director, the number 2, who is unbelievably, again, got a promotion out of this. A guy was murdered and someone got promoted, which is obscene and disgusting. He is part and parcel of this whole day-to-day ADPO, Assistant Director, Protective Operations, Deputy Director, Director chain that makes management decisions. When they tell you early on, we are not doing this for President Trump, Congressman. We're not doing counter sniper teams. We're not doing CSU. And then they say, well, on that day, we didn't deny assets. You didn't have to. You've been denying them for 4 years. I was told by a direct source, this is the quote, that at Mar-a-Lago, they were begging the DTD, the Donald Trump detail, begging for enhanced security. We can't secure this place like this. And one of the quotes from one of those 3 people I just told you about was, we don't secure nightclubs. Really? What if a nightclub owner runs for president? You don't secure you secure whatever the hell they tell you to secure. That's not your job. That is what happened here. And that's what they're going to rely on. And that's where you guys, I think, have had the guts to take this on. Do not Do not let them fall back on euphemisms and word games where they go, well, that specific day we didn't say no to any assets. Have you in the past? How often? Matter of fact, how many counter-surveillance teams have you actually dedicated? What percentage of Trump sites? How many CS teams? There's a story out there that was the first time counter-sniper Secret Service assets were ever used at a Donald Trump site. So you're telling me your most threatened protectee had no professional Secret Service overwatch? As Ben showed, these guys are more than skilled and competent. They don't need the Secret Service to tell them how to do
But
their
see,
job.
I think that gets to this intent question that Congressman Mills framed up perfectly at the beginning of our discussion. Congressman Mills says the key question here is whether this was your run-of-the-mill government incompetence or whether you see features of such just disregard for the duty at hand that you believe there's some malice. And in his opening statement, Mr. Prince says when the incompetence reaches a certain point, you can impute the malice to that. And what I think you have unique experience in is, well, like this culture of denying requests, like to Trump, or a circumstance where not even the Donald Trump detail, but the folks in the Pittsburgh field office who are not normally on the Trump detail were saying, hey, just based on this, we might need more, and they were discouraged from even making those requests, so they couldn't be denied. I think you can give us a lot of insight into the type of questions we need to be asking and of who to understand that culture, because like you think of the Secret Service, they're off with a number of protectees,
Yes.
right? Of all kind of different profiles and different, I guess, priority, for lack of a better term. And so, like, what should we think about imputing malice at a point in which Donald Trump, one of the most threatened people on the planet Earth, is having to endure these denials and this culture of limited protection while you're seeing other details, beefed up substantially?
I think, and I don't think I put this out yet, but I'll put it out there now. When I was there, it was definitely not a political enterprise. It just wasn't. I never once, working for President Clinton, Bush, and Obama, had anyone even remotely implicate a political motive for any decision whatsoever. However, from the commentary directed at some of the agents in charge of the Donald Trump detail, which I have heard about, clearly, it appears that for the first time in American history, we have a Secret Service that is making decisions that may not be all political, but may have a political tinge to them. So what you're saying, I would love to say, Congressman, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I tell you with a pure heart, and I'm being absolutely candid, I have no skin in this game. I don't work there anymore. I am not their PR guy. I run my own business. I absolutely believe Donald Trump and an enhanced security posture he should have had would have made him look more presidential, would have facilitated the logistical operation of him traveling. I think they were concerned about optics and making him look like a big shot or whatever, word you want to throw out there. And they were making some of these decisions based purely on grade school level politics.
I don't want to believe that, but I didn't want to believe
do
it
I.
with the FBI either. I didn't want to believe it with the NIH either. I mean, a lot of these agencies that have been, I think, subject to political capture, we want to think of them as above that. And we all spend time around Secret Service. We're inspired by their patriotism and the willingness you have to literally take a bullet for someone if necessary. But just like in the military, just like at the FBI, I worry about the political capture happening at headquarters, and then that culture informing decisions in a way that's very damaging to the country. So what Mr. Bongino just said ought to be the most important work of the United States Congress, to figure out if these decisions were run-of-the-mill incompetence that you've got to deal with the better tech and the better processes and the better HR and get rid of the DEI. But if it's something even darker and more devious than that, that must be rooted out, because what we've seen at these other agencies of government is it does not cure itself. It has to be excised, and that investigation is the most important work we can do. I thank you guys for leading this effort, and I yield back.
Something that they're bringing up here is that in sports, right, they talk about in baseball, there's the unwritten rules in baseball, and in politics, there's unwritten rules. There's just decorum. It doesn't matter who's in power, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. It's important that a job is done based off of how it needs to be done. So if in the future, let's say Donald Trump wins the election, and then let's say Donald Trump wins the election, and then the next Democrat is very popular and is gaining a lot of steam and becomes so popular and so controversial that it actually becomes the most famous person in the country at that point, almost like a populist movement, like we're seeing with Donald Trump. And that person becomes basically, they have the biggest threat, even more than like a sitting president. So Joe Biden is on vacation. He's in the White House. He's not campaigning. Kamala Harris is obviously campaigning, but Donald Trump at this time, it was against Joe Biden. Well, Joe Biden's not even really on the campaign trail much, and Donald Trump is on. He's working hard. He was clearly the biggest threat posed to at that time. And why then? So in order to not make Donald Trump look so important, they scaled down the amount of Secret Service agents that were available to him because, you know, the optics, right? And that's just not the way the job's supposed to be done. So it's just, again, we see this pattern. And another thing that Bongino said in that clip that's so important is word euphemisms, right? When you're watching these hearings and you're listening to the way people speak, and yes, Republicans in Congress do this as well, mostly the neocons that are still in the Republican Party. But something we see almost every single Democrat representative do is that it's a game of words. And that's what Dan was saying. It's like, yeah, they can say that, no, I didn't do that yesterday. And you'll see this, the person who does this, the two people that you'll see, and actually the three people, I should say, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, if you see hearings with him, does it all the time. Nobody does it more probably than Mayorkas when he's answering his questions, who's the man, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and in charge of your border, our border, and of course FBI Director Wray. Also, Wray is not as bad as the other two. He does sometimes like to work, but when it's clearly putting him in an unfavorable position, he will immediately resort to word euphemisms. So definitely a common practice in Washington. So now, after hearing what we've heard, you have to ask yourself, is there a culture problem, or what are the culture problems currently at the Secret Service? And this is a really good exchange here. Definitely worth your time. Here we go.
Certainly.
And I want to go to you, Mr. Bongino. I want to point out some things because culture failure, as my colleagues point out and others, I want to mention a couple of things. August 14th, 2024 is reported failure that a Secret Service agent abandoned her post without permission to breastfeed child before Donald Trump was scheduled to arrive in North Carolina. August 12, 2024, it was reported that a Secret Service special agent who was an official site agent for the July 13 Butler PA rally is under investigation for posing videos and photos for protective assignments to social media. July 27, 2024, a Secret Service agent covered the security camera of a local salon in Pittsburgh, Massachusetts, before an event featuring Kamala Harris where the salon was closed, but opened it up without approval and utilizing restrooms for an hour and a half while the building's security alarm was going off. July 2nd, 2023, it was reported that a former Secret Service Director Cheadle and senior agency leader sought to destroy the cocaine found in the White House in July of 2024. The evidence was not destroyed due to pushback.
I have to stop it there for 1 second because that's one thing that does not get talked about. How is it possible that at the White House a bag of cocaine was discovered and no forensics, really, on a plastic bag? How does that make sense? When they tell you that no one is above the law, do you really believe that? And I know that Republicans and MAGA don't, but I hope that some Democrats and some independents that still haven't made their decision are paying attention. This is what they mean by lawfare. How is it possible that a cocaine bag is found in the White House? There's cameras everywhere. This should be one of the easiest crimes to solve. I'm not, we can all make our assumptions, right? From what I've heard, it's not who you think it is. It's not Hunter, right? Is the main theory out there? It is a different member of the family. Not Joe either, but someone else. And the thing is that, like, the cocaine bag just, is urged to, evidence gets destroyed. It's really, corruption at some of the highest levels. If no one is above the law, how is it possible that that wasn't figured out? And you have to ask yourself, were people, if you were a victim of, you were in an investigation that involved cocaine, Was the baggie checked for fingerprints? Was DNA samples and all that investigated for you? Because if that's the case, then does that mean that somebody who is in the White House was above the law? So whenever people are talking about no one is above the law, there's no credibility to you saying that if you're not doing it all the time in such a clear-cut case as a cocaine bag being found inside the White House. Anyway, continue.
Back in individuals in the Secret Service Forensic Service Divisions. May 2024, a man enters the U.S. Secret Service Miami field office through a propped open door and was not removed from the building until the following morning. April 24, 2024, a special agent assigned to Harris's detail had a mental breakdown where the agent is reported to have physically attacked the commanding agent in charge at the base after verbal disputes with other agents. Sometimes during 2023 and 2024, at least 2 people breached President Obama's Hawaii residence. Though the president wasn't there at the residence, his 2 daughters were on premise at the time. April 2023, a drunken intruder entered the home of National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in the middle of the night. The man was able to gain access to Sullivan's home despite 24/7 Secret Service protective services in Sullivan due to the sensitive nature of his position. Now, I want to go back to a comment that you made, Mr. Bongino, where you said none of these problems are new. I think just the list of those that I've just mentioned shows that this is not a new problem, but it's existed for quite a while. And with a $3 billion annual budget, I would think that we would start evaluating those mistakes to make those corrective actions. Would you agree with the things that I've listed, with the budget that is allocated, that there should be a much better provision of security for protectees than what you're seeing today?
Oh, there's zero dispute about this. You know, Mr. Prince's company had accountability. People fire him and find a new company if he lost a protectee. You can't fire the Secret Service. 18 U.S.C. 3056, they're obligated to protect him. The Secret Service has a culture problem, Congressman. I was an instructor in our training academy in Beltsville, Maryland for 3 years. I ran operations over there, taught investigations over there, spent a little time in the Control Tactics Unit. I was there for 3 years. Unfortunately, I can't count on one hand. I would need probably 2 and toes as well to count how many agents who could not meet even basic protective functioning skills and criminal investigative skills, but who met other criteria completely irrelevant to job performance, who were pushed through and told with a wink and a nod, this woman or man needs to graduate. Well, why? They're clearly incompetent. Every instructor who's encountered this person has said this person's incompetent to the point where in judgment drills, they're killing the protectee in the judgment drills. That's kind of not what we do. You're not supposed to shoot the protectee yourself in a simunition drill. And you would say things, you would hear things, from special agents in charge. And I encourage you all to look into this, how the training center works and how they graduate students, where they would say, well, that person files a lot of complaints, like EEO complaints. Okay, well, are they real? That sounds serious. Sounds like a serious thing to me. I take that stuff seriously. And they would say, well, they file them enough that it's become a nuisance and they're not really legitimate. But because this person files a lot of complaints, we need to graduate them. Some of those people now, matter of fact, not just a few, but many are out on protective assignments now. And again, this
so
is
what you're saying is that DEI plays a major role, not meritocracy, with regards to the current culture that has been fostered.
No, not a. No, the major role. The Secret Service right now is dominated by D. It's not a role. It's the role. You ask agents on the president.
I think that everyone's heard me say before, DEI equals DIE. You know, DEI stands for didn't earn it. And
well,
we need
it did
to be
for
very
Corey
cautious in how we
so
do this.
Ask his family.
Correct. I just want to move $3 billion budget. Would you not agree?
And this goes on, look, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Look, no one is saying that a woman can't be Secret Service, okay? But she better darn well be Brienne of Tarth, right? From Game of Thrones, who is a mountain of a human being, all right? Doesn't matter if you're male or female or any of that stuff or what color you are or what background you are. I'm Hispanic, for example. I don't need Hispanic representation in the Secret Service. I should not be protecting the President of the United States. I'm not tall enough. Donald Trump towers over me by several inches. I'm not. Why would I be in charge of protecting the President of the United States? It's just common sense. And that's something that you need to remember come November. who's making these initiatives to just bring in people because they want it to look a certain way? We don't need representation in military, in Secret Service, even to some extent in some police, depending on what, like on the SWAT team or Navy SEALs, or these people are going and dealing with dangerous situations where literally life and death is on the line. This is not the place to be messing around with representation. You need the people who are the most physically fit, the most capable, who can handle the most pressure and the most intense situations to be in those jobs. So, that's the that's the pushback when people, when you hear Republicans are against DEI. Well, yeah, in certain things, absolutely. And you can argue that in the private industries, usually DEI doesn't work because you should be hiring people based on merit. You want people who are in leadership positions, who are in charge, or who are running your company that know how to run that company. I would say in a very clear-cut case in the entertainment world, if you look at Star Wars, it's quite clear that Kathleen Kennedy has no business being in charge of Star Wars, because look at how it was one of the most successful franchises, and now the ratings for almost every project coming out is literally in the gutter. I don't want to get off subject, but I think you're getting the point that I'm trying to make, because this isn't just in politics, but extremely important. Again, unless you got Brienne of Tarth, you saw the women in the pictures that are clearly not as tall as Donald Trump. They should not be protecting the president that in that proximity. So it's just something to remember there. All right, we need this is a really powerful back and forth here with the Ben Schaefer, where he says, please confirm with me the mistakes that were made locally on the day of. So here we go.
And didn't take the communication platform that was given by local forces, correct?
That's correct.
Didn't take the surveillance drone offered by local forces, is that correct?
That is correct.
Didn't show up for the morning briefing to ensure that last-minute planning could be accounted for.
That is correct.
Didn't take any necessary measures to talk to the Kubota dealer, who was 400 yards away, to the 12 o'clock direct line of sight to even see whether or not they could gain access to that rooftop or talk to the owner.
That is correct.
Did not access the water tower, which has the highest vantage point, and provide oversight that would have also looked at the AGR building.
That is correct.
I'm looking at all this and I'm noting a lot of no's, of things that didn't happen. And unfortunately, because we've allowed this to go on for weeks and weeks, we're now going to be faced with the fact that they're going to be memorializing all these documents to reflect July 9, July 10, July 11, dotting I's, crossing T's that wasn't actually going forward. Now, I just need you to kind of confirm the no's. And
what Corey Mills said there at the end is about now that it's been clear that this hasn't been checked, basically Secret Service is going to go back and make sure those files are nice and polished before they get reviewed. And that's, again, when we're reacting this slowly to possible corruption or mistakes that have happened, people cover their butts, right? And so if you have a chance to do that, you're going to go back and you're going to re-edit the paperwork to make sure, hey, like you said, that the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and so forth. So a little bit further, there's a really powerful moment here with Chip Roy, the representative from Texas. And this is a 10-minute clip right here. So a really powerful back and forth here. This was Chip Roy's, I think, most important moment. One of the most important moments here in the conference. So listen carefully to what he said.
You get ready, McCormick. You get ready. The world will see a vibrant Republican.
See beyond the president, you can see the shooter moving across the room. Now, I look at this as someone who is a prosecutor, worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office, who worked in the Attorney General's office, not as someone who was a sniper like Mr. Mills or Mr. Crane, working the Secret Service. But to be very clear, the perimeter, the building he shot from is outside of the perimeter. And the video we can see him clearly just a mere 130 yards away. So here's the setup that I want to ask. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Bongino. Do you believe that you can just chalk up to mere incompetence that the Secret Service did not attend the 9 o'clock meeting for scheduling purposes? They literally just didn't attend. Can you chalk up, and just, I'm going to go down the list and jump in. Can you chalk up to mere incompetence the conversations about the communications that we talked about before, where you didn't have a body present and they were using the cell phones? and they did not retrieve the radios, as Mr. Higgins has reported. Can you chalk it up to mere incompetence that they identified crooks about an hour ahead of time, and that President Trump was never removed from the stage? They didn't delay, they didn't hold him back, they didn't remove him from the potential danger. That the perimeter did not include the buildings around over here, and to the extent, should there have been a perimeter that was farther out, and to the extent that the perimeter wasn't farther out, that they at least make sure the building wasn't covered. Is that just incompetence? Is it just incompetence that there was no drone being flown and the drone was turned down by the Secret Service? Was it just incompetence that the shooter had a drone, as the FBI director testified in front of the House Judiciary Committee, that he literally had flying within a couple hundred feet of the stage the same day, mere hours before the shooting? Is it just incompetence, what we're hearing now about the whistleblower saying that there were no canines? Was it just incompetence that there wasn't sufficient policing along the security border? Was it just incompetence that there was allegedly an abandoning of the post due to heat? That there was supposed to be someone on top of the roof and that they didn't get on the roof because it was too hot? Is it just incompetence that there was additional security requests turned down, according to the memos that we saw out of Senator Josh Hawley, and encouraging agents not to request additional security requests? And was it just incompetent what we saw with respect to the police body footage, which I'll play here in just a second, if we could cue up the police body footage video, where you've got the local police talking about what they said to the Secret Service. If y'all could play that video real quick, and then I want you to respond.
Well, body's a good, that's a good word. I told them they need to post the guy over here. I told them that the Secret Service. I told them that Tuesday. I told them to post guys over here.
I have no contact with the inside.
What? I thought you guys were on the roof. No, we're inside.
Alpha 1, Bravo 1. Taking.
Okay, that's good. Thank you all. Mr. Bongino,
I told them to post
can you
guys over here.
respond to that? To my question about can you respond to that?
Sure.
Can you respond to that question? Because that's what the American people want to know.
You know, Congressman, if you had just ended with your first statement and said, well, we may have screwed up the perimeter, you could maybe attribute it to ignorance. Layered incompetence always means intent, correct? So I'll give you an example. You're in a mall parking lot, it's 97 degrees, and you leave a kid in there and you close the door. Did they intend to kill the kid? Probably not. But how stupid do you have to be to do that? So in Secret Service training, you're basically taught a ring-based system, but don't think of it as rings. Think of it as a three-dimensional ring, like a bubble with rings. So you got this circle, but it's three-dimensional above and below. In that outer ring, again, this is Secret Service 101, Charlie Brown encyclopedia stuff. This isn't like advanced level PDT, protective detail training. In that outer ring, you have police officers. That outer ring is out to about 1,000 yards, which is about what a really technically proficient sniper can hit. Why was the perimeter set to, again, absolute total incompetence? But then factor in the other things, and I just want to add a few more. How is it that a counter surveillance unit whose actual job is to detect, to counter surveillance, that's what they do. They're the best at what they do. We asked the question during the conversation we had earlier. How is it that they missed this guy roaming around when the police officers, clearly using their good law enforcement instincts, said we've got a problem? The answer is because they weren't there. Is that incompetence, or is that shutting the door in 97 degrees with your kid there going, I just didn't know? How did you not have a roof line 130 yards away secured when you're taught day one in Secret Service training that the effective range of a really quality sniper is out to 1,000 yards? How did you not have a drone? That not only did you not have a drone, again, this is where we get to the shutting the door in 97 degrees and pretending you didn't know. It was offered. They offered you a drone. It's unforgivable. And just think of the rings quickly, and I'll wrap this up. So in the outer ring, you have police officers, you have counter surveillance, and you have a protective intelligence team. Protective intelligence team is trained to go and find threats. They miss them. There's no counter surveillance team. The cops catch it, but because the comms break down, they miss it. In that middle perimeter, you have what they call post standers. Post standers they're not DTD agents. They're field office agents. They're not Donald Trump detail agents. Those guys were not even Secret Service. They were HSI, most of them, who are great guys and were fantastic. But that's not what they do. If you grab me as a former Secret Service guy and said, hey, Dan, can you go do a Homeland Security investigation on this? No, that's not what I learned. We are training Secret Service agents to do protection so we don't have to use other entities that don't do protection. So that's the middle perimeter. So that breaks down. The inner perimeter, as you just saw, and I'm glad you played that video, envision that as what we would call the shift, the body guys, right? He's got a shift around them and supervisors. Everyone missed that guy crawling across the roof when he defeated the external, the middle, and the internal perimeter. You shut the door in 97 degrees. I'm sorry. Layered intent, layered incompetence like that is absolutely intent.
I've got another question on that, but I just want to ask you, Mr. Prince, real quick. Do you have any a relatively short comment on that? Can you dismiss all of this as sheer incompetence?
The question I want to have answered is if other counter sniper agents, officers, saw any person laying in a prone position with a rifle pointed at the President of the United States, do they have authorization to take a shot immediately, or do they have to get permission? Because if the Secret Service wasn't there and they were laying at a stakeout for a bank robbery, would they have to get permission if they saw means and intent to murder someone? I don't understand why any of the other officers didn't engage sooner.
Mr. Schaefer, do you have any comment on that in terms of the engagement and the rules of engagement that were in place?
Yeah, absolutely. I can clarify that a little bit. So as a law enforcement sniper, we have a lot of responsibilities and inherited flexibility. One of those flexible procedures or statuses that we incur is known as compromised authority. Compromised authority in the law enforcement sense basically lays out the requirements for a deadly force response. And in that point in time, based on all the prerequisites that were identified and all the checks in the boxes that were made, Mr. Crooks would have met that level or that threshold.
I'll let some of the experts on that subject follow up on that. I think there's probably some more follow up there. I just want to ask one last question, my last minute time. Mr. Bongino, we talked about this before. I have seen credible information, the extent to which the shooter had significant explosives that were sophisticated beyond that you would expect some 20-year-old just to put together, and that he had sophisticated detonation devices on his person, or a sophisticated detonation device, and importantly that his digital footprint is completely MIA, that his digital footprint is missing, and that how can a 20-year-old in today's time have no digital footprint? So do you have any thoughts on that, any comments on that? And that'll be my last question.
Well, 4 years of doing protective intelligence investigations with the Secret Service, interviewed probably hundreds of people who have credibly threatened our protectees. I've never seen anything like it. If you would have told me it was a 60-year-old guy who had lived most of his life without a computer and for the last 10 years had been planning this, hard to believe but digestible. You're telling me a 20-year-old kid who's grown up in the digital era figured this out when he was, 13? To never get an online presence? We've seen nothing. Nothing. We're now 6 weeks in. There's not a Facebook photo. You know, it's incredible. We know every single thing about these shooting incidents when there's a political narrative to be had by the media and the other side. We do. You know who their high school girlfriend was. Sadly, you know everything about these people. We know nothing about this guy. And sophisticated explosives, we have this massive law enforcement bureaucracy. No one's got him with an online search history at a library saying, how do I build this? He's 20 years old. It just defies logic. I can tell you, again, 4 years doing these exact investigations, never, ever seen or heard anything like this in my life.
For a couple of minutes.
Yeah. So basically, no trail of anything for Crooks in terms of, if you want to do something foul and you have an incendiary device, you have a bomb of some kind, right? Well, you have to know how to make that. It required putting things together. You're not just going to know how to do that. You have to check out a book. You have to go to the library's internet, a friend's internet, something. And so, there's no digital footprint of this kid. We have more than enough technology to find out. And yet somehow some young 20-year-old was able to create an explosive device. They found explosives. He was planning to do something with them. He thank God he wasn't able to use them. But it just goes to show you, I mean, something doesn't smell right. You see what I mean? And Dan Bongino's an expert. He tells you he's done so many cases because this nothing that he's ever seen before. So you have to ask yourself, is this the exception? Is it, well, this time is it more believable to say that, oh yeah, for sure, this is just, it's just a strange coincidence? Or now that we're seeing a pattern of very questionable things that are building up, is this not just another layer to maybe something more sinister? Well, that leads to this next question, and this is only a quick one of a minute 36 of if this is malice, then we're going down a road that nobody wants to go down.
If needed.
Thank you. And Mr. Prince, you mentioned security bubbles. And I want you to elaborate on that because we've talked a little bit about the perimeter. And the perimeter seems oddly narrow in this particular instance. Can you talk about security bubbles and the perimeters here?
As Dan was talking, right, normally that bubble is out to 1,000 yards based on how far a capable sniper can take a shot. The fact is, clearly this bubble was less than 100 yards because they disregarded the industrial facility, the water tower, et cetera, and it speaks to the lack of seriousness of Secret Service leadership in how they were conducting these missions. I don't think they regarded Trump as a worthy protectee. They were doing the absolute minimum. And I'd say my greater concern is as you look at all the litany of failure is long and deep. And if it tips towards malice, that opens up an entirely different can of worms.
Right.
Because it's hard to be part of a republic with people that actually want to kill you.
Right.
Political disagreement, fine. Sell it at the ballot box. But if people don't want to sell it at the ballot box, then it gets sold by a cartridge box. And that's a very, very dangerous road to go down.
Right.
If people don't want to settle it with the ballot box, they will settle it with a cartridge box. Doesn't matter what side you're on. The Obamas should be safe. Kamala Harris should be protected. Joe Biden should be protected. All these people, no matter who they are, Ilhan Omar, AOC, Raskin, you're going to notice a pattern I'm saying here. No, they should be protected, right? If you want to beat these people, you don't beat them with political violence. And from everything I hear in the messaging, I don't hear Republicans promoting political violence. The mainstream media wants to tell you that they do, but it's far from the truth. This is extremely important, and it has to be clamped down on. This has to be cleaned. You mean to tell me the Secret Service says, okay, everything from here forward is going to be secured, but we're not going to regard anything 100 yards behind me, including high points? When is that the standard? It's always been 1,000 yards, 3D bubble, just like Dan just said. All right, moving on. There is something called the holding room. So here's a good question about when there was a suspicious person, why the heck was Donald Trump not put in the holding area? Let's see what they say.
Why was there no security hold put on Trump at any time if you had some kind of individual, I mean, that Mr. Schaefer has described actually did arise to a threat level? Why was there no security hold put on President Trump? Why was he allowed to go on the stage? Why wasn't he taken down? Why didn't we see a pause?
For me.
Yeah, Dan.
What makes your question even more impactful is every Secret Service site for a high threat level protectee has what they call a holding room, which you would guess is for holding the protectee. I see Congressman Gacy because it's actually called the holding room. The holding room is for things just like this. The holding room is let's say a congressman shows up and is a little late. There's an accident. They'll hold them in the holding room saying, enjoy. You all have been in it. None of this is new. You've been in the holding room. There's a Secret Service agent at the door. You guys have congressional hardpins. A staffer escorts you in. Every one of you has seen this or will in the Trump administration. This is not a mystery to anyone. Why was he put on what Eric had called accurately so the X? We use the exact same terminology as the military. The X is where that protectee or that limo with the protectee in it is. Why was he put on the X? You have an open threat. Ben is described and your timeline lays out was there for an hour. I'm not going to play any word games. Were they a threat or suspicious? Well, if you're a threat, it's because you're doing something suspicious. And if you're suspicious, it's because you could be a threat. These are silly, stupid word games. You know when it's not a threat? When your CSU or PI team goes and grabs the guy and determines he's not a threat. Until then, your question's accurate. You put him in the holding room, which is the point of the holding room.
And you say you're going to hold.
Yeah, it sounds pretty basic, right? But the counter surveillance unit wasn't there. The CSU, right? I mean, all they had to do was send in, if the Secret Service had done its job, an hour when the guy was found to be suspicious in there, all you have to do is send 2-3 guys over there to go and check it out and see, hey, what are you doing over here? We see that you have a rangefinder. What is this for? What's in the bag? Would have prevented, we wouldn't have lost a comparator, a hero, and we wouldn't have almost, been close to losing Donald Trump. So, plus the injured folks here. All that could have been prevented right then and there. You just do your job, and that's the point. This is a job that cannot fail, all right? How is it that Cheadle wasn't fired? She was allowed to resign. That's the other thing that you have to ask yourself. Do you want, people always demand accountability. Well, are you seeing accountability from the Biden-Harris administration if they don't even clearly fire Director Cheadle and they give her the opportunity to resign for this catastrophic failure? Does that sound like accountability to you? Like they're saying, man, gotta defeat these people at the ballot box. All right, so now this leads to another question. We've been hearing failure after failure, just craziness, incompetence, possibly malice. So now they're going to ask Dan, do you have any confidence that the Secret Service has learned its lesson?
Thank you. Mr. Bongino, do you have any confidence that Secret Service has learned their lesson?
No, because I've been involved in a number of, we have 10 years in the Secret Service. I was in the training center when the Georgia grenade nearly exploded. And, the only reason it didn't kill President Bush is because the guy wrapped it in a towel. That's it. It's the only reason he survived, because we got lucky. And the changes made from that lasted about a month. They added more magnetometers. And then basically the same problems resurface again. So no.
I want to read a text to you and see what your thoughts are on this. Do you know who Joe Kent is? Mr. Bongino? Joe Kent, he's running for Congress right now, Special Forces guy.
Oh, yes.
Up in Washington.
Yeah.
This is a text he sent me on, I believe, Monday, August 19th. He said, hey, brother, I know you are doing an independent J13 investigation. I want to share this anecdote with you from my experience with Speaker Mike Johnson's U.S. Secret Service detail this weekend. Bottom line up front. Speaker's detail was incredibly lax, failed to seal off all entrances to a very small venue. Johnson wasn't secured and very easy to access. Long version. We had a local steakhouse host my fundraiser with the speaker. Location was only available after people RSVP'd. But the entrances to the steakhouse had Kent for Congress signs on the 2 entrances. One entrance was inside the hotel, one out on the street in a busy pedestrian area. I arrived about 45 minutes early to check out the venue and to make sure my team had stuff ready. I also wanted to see if the U.S. Secret Service had a checkpoint set up. I carry everywhere. I planned on leaving my pistol in a hotel room my team had there. I entered the hotel, followed the Kent signs into the steakhouse, and immediately walked up to the unsecured holding room the speaker was in. He was on a call, so he did not notice me. Neither did any of his detail. His detail was inside the restaurant just BSing. No control over the 2 entrances at all. Once the event started, they put on a good show and looked the part. I can't interpret their intent, but they failed a basic, simple task. Secure the 2 entry points, a shocking level of incompetence. The event was in Vancouver in the shadow of Portland, Oregon. Mr. Bongino, is Speaker Johnson, what's his job?
Well, that would be Capitol Hill Police, but it speaks to a larger issue with these security failures. What was mentioned about 3/4 of the way through that text, where everything becomes about optics. I'll give you just a quick example. You know, think about this. Why are Secret Service agents out there wearing suits? You don't see that with a lot of Israeli Shin Bet and others because the threat over there is existential every day. I mean, these are little things. You're worried about optics and what people look like, you know, red ties on agents and guys who've got their shoes shined when you're not worried about door kickers who are going to keep you alive. The good show part is a problem, and it's ubiquitous, whether it's DSS, whether it's Capitol, whether it's Secret Service. We have to start focusing on job tasks and not, you know, operational optics or who's got the freshly pressed suit on. These guys have to be out there ready to go into action and defeat that 15, 20-man Hezbollah team or group of Sicarios Eric's talking about before. This was a 20-year-old kid who broke them down. Can you imagine if they had detonated, taken out that fence line, and rushed a 10, 15-man team in there with rifles and heavy weapons? You know, there would have been a mass murder scene. That motorcade would have never gotten out of there.
Yeah.
Crane.
Yeah, I mean, it's just common sense, right? Our Secret Service are more concerned about being in a suit and tie than being equipped to handle the job. And what happens if we're talking about one guy, but what if there's an organized attack on someone of importance? I mean, the Speaker of the House is one of the most important, powerful positions in Washington. It doesn't matter if it's Mike Johnson or if it's Akeem Jeffries, they have to be protected. We cannot look, you know, if you're going to represent being the most powerful country on earth, you can't give the sign that any foreign entity can just come in and take out someone that they disagree with. We cannot have that. And, you know, we have to protect the republic. That's why you defeat bad ideas at the ballot box. That's why when we hear politicians say, take to the streets and bully them and this and that, that's not how you win. That's promoting violence. That leads to mobs coming in and getting out of control and then hurting somebody. And we've seen it time and time again. We've been very lucky with the few amount of times. I mean, we were so lucky, we literally had an assassination attempt that by an inch, and it just happened to turn his head, you know, former president wasn't killed in front of everybody. So again, this leads to, again, some very dark questions that nobody wants to ask, but they need to be asked. Was this an inside job?
A lot of Americans believe that this was possibly an inside job just based on everything that they've seen leading up to the assassination attempt. They saw efforts to impeach Donald Trump. They saw efforts to, you know, put him into bankruptcy. You know, they saw the DOJ weaponized against him, and they saw, you know, folks try and put him in jail for 750 years, and then this happens. I know you have an interesting take on that where you really don't believe that. Can you go ahead and share that with this panel today?
Listen carefully, because this is a big conspiracy that's on the internet, even amongst the MAGA. And this is, you know, this kind of, well, it's up, you decide for yourself, right? But a lot of people are saying that there was a second shooter on site. Well, if there was a second shooter, then don't take my word for it. Eric Prince, who's an expert in the field, he has an explanation.
You're right. There is a long list of ways that the one political party has weaponized all aspects of government in our society against their political opponent. And that is exceedingly dangerous for the survival of the republic, because that can go both ways. I don't think this was a grand conspiracy, another shooter, etc. Because if there was a second shooter, when the 20-year-old was shot and the Secret Service detail did an awful job of getting Trump off the X and let him stand up again, great instincts of the president to come back defiant, having just been shot in the head, to come back and say, fight, fight, fight. Great instincts on him. He never should have had the opportunity to do that, because his detail should have put him horizontal and moved him off there immediately. If there was a second shooter, it was a prime time for them to be shooting. So I don't believe there is a second shooter. I think this is a litany of incompetence. And it speaks to, as we also remember the anniversary of the debacle of Afghanistan, our problem is we have a federal government that doesn't have any accountability in any way, shape, or form. And I push back on you in Congress to affect the bureaucracy the one way that they care: cut their damn budget. Starve them out. Nothing else will get their attention other than their starvation.
Yeah, that's when Trump got up and said fight, 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 he should have never been allowed to do that. Politically, it's a great move. Obviously, we were all inspired and got chills when I saw it live and I saw him get up and he was like, fight, fight, fight. Two things came from that. You got leftists on the internet who were saying this has to be fake because look how he gets up and he does that. Well, there's a little bit of credibility to the question, isn't there? How could he be allowed to get up again? If there was a second shooter, the minute he gets up and is exposed saying fight, 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 he would have gotten shot right there. So that's why, again, the second shooter, you could just forget that. And I'm not even going to entertain the fake nonsense because it's so insulting. It's not even worth talking about. But, you know, these are the things that sometimes I just don't understand. So, here's where Matt Gaetz, in a powerful 5 minutes, he breaks down and summarizes all the problems and basically he's asking for solutions. So, you know, what do we do to fix this, right? So let's go ahead and see what he says.
I've learned a lot in this session, and here's what I think I've picked up. One thing did not go wrong that resulted in President Trump being shot. Mr. Bongino explained the 3 different layers and the lack of air controls. Mr. Schaefer explained the comms breakdowns. You got the paperwork back and forth with the field office and headquarters. So all these things are going wrong. So then the obvious question is, why did that systemic cascading failure occur? And I think you've given us really good testimony as to why. First, it's Bongino saying, well, this was bound to happen based on these structural failures with technology failures, with this embrace of DEI and a quota system. You had a very low floor to start with. And then I don't want to bury the lead here. You heard Mr. Prince's testimony that he believes that a motivation here might be they just didn't deem Trump a sufficiently worthy protectee, and that could inform on it. And then I think the most damaging, and I never really contemplated until you gave the testimony, Mr. Bongino, that giving the Trump detail the assets they requested, air, additional manpower presence, more folks so that not everything is pushed out to locals, but indeed is the folks that have gone through the type of training that you provided in Maryland. Well, that was because that kind of a force posture could make Trump appear more presidential, more ascendant, more in charge. And I do think that in addition to what Mr. Prince has said about budget, there are things Congress can do to direct specific demands for documents around those 3 vectors and work on all of them. To the structural issues, Mr. Prince, is it something leadership can fix? Because one thing we've found is that you try to put downward pressure on any budget around here for anything, and it's like you're committing a war crime. And in some cases, we've seen some agencies improve when you get the right leadership in and can administer an effective agency. What's your perspective on that?
I remember in the late 80s, during the Iran-Contra crisis, controversy, and the CIA was not being forthcoming with some documents that Congress had requested. And of course, the Democrats were in charge of Congress then. Tip O'Neill was the speaker. He made it very clear that he was specifically withholding all the pay for all the SIS, the Special Intelligence Service, Senior Intelligence Service officers at CIA headquarters until those documents were delivered. Shocker, the documents were delivered by Friday to the Congress. Bureaucrats will respond to very specific pain points. I think it even speaks wider than this debacle in Butler, Pennsylvania, but the fact that and it speaks to under-resourcing Trump. They no-resourced Bobby Kennedy, RFK, when his uncle assassinated while president, his father assassinated while attorney general for the act of politics in America. And they denied him. So it is not too much to surmise that a politicized Secret Service succumbing to the whims of Jill Biden, sending 4 post holders to cover Trump, 12 to cover Jill Biden. At that point, no coverage of Bobby Kennedy. Again, this can only be solved. Congress has the power of purse. Use it as a large bludgeon.
Yeah, Mr. Schaefer, is there any dynamic you think I've missed in sort of summarizing this as, low agency performance generally layered with the other dynamics that the other witnesses have shared?
I don't believe so, Congressman. I think you've covered most of the relevant points in describing how that posture all relates and how this, began as maybe a single failure and multiplied into a much greater failure, just based on different levels. I'll say that, the local law enforcement agencies that were involved that day, both tactical and non-tactical, were improvising, adapting, and overcoming to a lack of intelligence that was provided to them that day. In my historical background, in the Marine Corps, these types of events require planning, require reconnaissance, require intelligence in multiple stages. It requires rehearsals, things that were not seen in this event for this day. My knowledge is when I came onto the scene that morning, that I was fed multiple briefs and multiple maps of the area. I gathered information as much as I could the night before, which is about the same time as my commander had received the briefings for that day. So we really felt like we were on the back foot and just tried to overcome that throughout the day and gather what we could.
Great, thank you. My time's expired, but I think you've all provided us excellent areas for further inquiry.
All right.
Hand it over for the honor.
We go now to. All right, more suspicious activity around the shooting. So let's break it down.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. I want to go over some forensic questions because I think that as we continue to peel the layers back, what we don't find is enough answers, but more questions that need to be asked.
Major questions.
Just in a quick yes or no, do you find it odd that literally only days after the attempted assassination on President Donald J. Trump, while the roof was too sloped to place individuals for counter-sniper operations, that it wasn't too sloped to a roof for the FBI to go ahead and tamper, in my opinion, with evidence by washing the roof off that may have had significant evidence on it? Do you find that odd?
Yes, I do, Congress.
Mr. Prince?
Yeah, I certainly don't realize, I don't understand what the rush was to wash a roof.
Mr. Bongino?
Oh, I understand why.
Do we also find it odd that, as of recent, one of our colleagues, Representative Higgins, had uncovered the fact that the body of Matthew Crooks had not only been released and cremated, but that the coroner who's responsible for releasing the body had no knowledge of it? Mr. Schaefer?
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Prince?
The body's
Sounds
been
like
cremated.
destruction of evidence.
Mr. Bongino?
Given the gravity of what happened, absolutely.
Do you also find it odd that no ballistics, no toxicology report, no confidence in the actual, proof of who it was who took the shot has been provided to date? And also, just to follow on to that, how quickly the crime scene at the home was actually released before any evidence had been obtained and released? Mr. Schaefer?
In total analysis of your question, I think it warrants maybe a little more than a yes or no. I absolutely find that to be troubling. I also find that there were multiple friendlies that engaged the shooter that day, and no report has been given back to that local agency that was involved in that information. I feel that's critical.
Mr. Prince?
Suspicious.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of things that just smell around the entire thing. And like I said in my opening statement, only the disinfectants of transparency will clean this up. And so covering it up and hiding only compounds a really bad look on the federal government.
Mr. Bongino?
Yeah, I'll say again, given the gravity of the situation, extremely odd.
Do we find it odd that in addition to a 20-year-old not having a social media presence and being scrubbed, that in addition to having the knowledge on how to create sophisticated explosive devices with a multi-channel transmitter, that there was also leaked evidence or leaked information on regards to 3 encrypted accounts? Do you find it odd that these encrypted accounts, which are overseas, has not been discussed and or talked about at any point? Mr. Schaefer.
Absolutely, Congressman.
Mr. Prince.
In the same way that Congress passed a law in 1992 that within 25 years, all things related to the Kennedy assassination were supposed to be declassified and released, why cover this up? Why, again, what is being covered and what is being covered up and why? And it makes a bad situation even worse.
Mr. Bongino.
Odd, to say the least, yes.
I want to go back to something earlier as well. Mr. Bongino, Secret Service, NYPD, worked in the actual training of it. Do you believe that a protective detail should be appointed based upon the title you carry or the threat level based upon the office in which you are to obtain?
It should exclusively be based on a threat assessment. It should have nothing to do with the title.
And do you agree that if you were the Secret Service director, that when the request came in based on President Trump's profile, based on the existing threats that would need to be mitigated, based on the request by his own officers, that would be something that you would approve or disapprove?
There isn't a scenario where a sane, rational, well-trained Secret Service agent would deny CSU or counter-sniper assets to a threat, to a protectee with a threat footprint like Donald Trump. Not a chance.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I know that you're enjoying the private sector, but I can tell you we'd have been far better off by having the director of the Secret Service be Dan Bongino than it be Ronald Rowe or Director Cheadle. I'm going to go ahead with this and turn it over to...
It's a humble man right there. Even when they said something like that, he took it as a compliment, but you can tell he's just humble about it. But all right, let's. We're getting close to the end here. Chip Roy talks about how we need to defund some things.
The psychology is always reversed. It says if you take the money away from the Secret Service in this case, or let's say we're talking about Border Patrol, dealing with the border. We had Mark Morgan here earlier. Anything we do to say, hold on, no, we're not going to give you this funding unless we get X. And then the other side says, well, you're taking away the funding from the thing you say you want. And i.e., we want a competent Secret Service. What is your response to that as someone who has been an effective and efficient manager of a large-scale organization dealing with security, to push back on that argument, which I think is a flawed argument? I have my own views on it, but I want to hear your thoughts.
What made America great, what made our society effective in the first place was competition, was innovation and efficiency from the private sector. Government did not make America great. And so that is a fundamental difference in paradigm that needs to be settled at the ballot box. And even Republicans have to return to being they have to return to be the party of fiscal sanity, because even Republicans have been runaway spenders, prolific, and it's like going downhill on one ski instead of on two skis. We've been going downhill.
Yep, it's both parties. It's very fair. Absolutely. What else, though? What about the Iranians?
We had some reporting from Ms. Crabtree, who was here with the panel earlier and is here with us now, earlier about the potential engagement or interference, I should say, by Iranian authorities in terms of our ability to protect our president, Secret Service, and so forth. Do you have any perspectives on that and why that's particularly problematic, or anything to add about that, and how our foreign adversaries are viewing what we're seeing unfold in front of us?
Well, I want you to keep in mind that we've known about the Iranian threat after the death of Soleimani to John Bolton, Donald Trump, former President Trump, and others for well over 3 years now. So there's no, keep in mind, this is a regime that has a history of documented terror attacks who sloganeers death to America. So they're not actually, their motives are, you don't have to investigate their motives, they tell you. They've known about it. If they have, and Susan's an excellent reporter, if you're not following her, you're making a big mistake on this. I have no reason to not believe her reporting or its accuracy. She's been that good.
3 sources, if I remember correctly.
If these 3 sources are accurate, that we have been compromised, and security allocation decisions are being made by people under the influence of the Iranian terror regime, then this is going to be a whole different panel if we do this again. By the way, I have to run.
Closing, 'cause I know you need to go.
Yeah, that's it's just insane. All right, this is the final notes here of final questions with more to come.
Crane, but before I close, I just have one more question for you, Mr. Schaefer, which is, can you tell me exactly how many rounds and how many shots were fired?
Yes, so the total round count that was released after the investigations were done were 10 rounds, 8 by the shooter himself, the threat, and 2 friendly rounds after that.
The 2 rounds both making impact, or can you confirm on this?
That has not been made possible, or we have not had the opportunity to confirm that based on the withheld information of the autopsy report.
And given your involvement in this, what also have you heard on the explosives and the sophistication of the devices?
So the explosive devices that were used, the primary charge was a homemade variant known as ammonium nitrate and fuel oil, or AMFO, supposedly manufactured possibly in the residence of the home. Obviously, for those that don't know, in the construction of these types of materials, there's a process. There are things that need to be procured, and most likely those things would have been located through online means, which again leads to more questions, in this matter. And then the programming of those devices were done with a remote detonating device that was specifically designed for that purpose, most commonly used in the commercial fireworks market.
So needless to say that these types of devices being bought would have brought someone up on an FBI watch list potentially, very much so like the Pakistani individual who was arrested on July 12th who had traveled to Iran prior to coming into Houston would have been on that FBI watch list. I want to just thank everyone who's here today. I want to thank everyone who is watching and participating in this. Needless to say, this is the beginning of more of these forums. This is not going to be the only one. We need to get further transparency and accountability for the American people. What we know is that not only was it a catastrophic failure, but all of our subject matter experts and our on ground has confirmed the suspicions that we all know to be true, which is how much of this is criminal gross negligence, how much of this was potentially compromised and purposeful intent, and how much more information is the FBI, the Department of Justice, the Secret Service, and Congress going to be willing to obtain in an effort to try and go ahead and provide this to you, we the people. I think that it's key that we not hide behind the lowest levels of classifications behind closed doors in any of our committees, understanding that Congress and our salaries are paid for by the American taxpayers, our House is paid for by the American taxpayers, and therefore the information too should be available to the American taxpayers. I think that we look at what was the coordination efforts between ESU, HSI, and Secret Service. I think we get to the bottom of who refused, not when, not what, but who refused the surveillance drone, who refused to utilize the communications that were provided, who refused to provide the site security plan that would have shown all the available buildings. Was each individual building numbered, and was those indicated during the time of the actual security planning? Where is Thomas Crooks as far as the toxicology and all the other reports? Where was the white van, and what is the follow-up? Why was the FBI so early to release? And even Attorney General Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, said she had never seen in her time as the Attorney General a crime scene released at such a rapid pace. What was the coroner's understanding of when the body was released, why and how? Why is it that they did not show up to the morning briefing? Why was a Kubota dealership only 400 yards away not being looked at? Where are the encrypted accounts, and why are we not getting further information? Again, I think that we're understanding that we've investigated the culture of the Secret Service and what needs to change, and why DEI is not healthy for our military, for our security services, or otherwise. But I think that we need to further investigate the questions of why did this take place, how did this take place, and what do we do to prevent it in the future and moving forward? We're going to do a quick close.
And the very last clip here, and very important message I want everyone to hear very loud and clear.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to close with one last thing, which is just, we talk about this, we talk about the president. We've certainly, go ahead and put him up there. We just want to make sure we honor and respect the passing of Mr. Comparator. And we're going to keep seeking the truth, but someone died that day, and that's why this matters. It goes beyond just the assault on the president, but a man lost his life. Yield back.
Not just a man, but a hero, Corey Comparator. And, you know, I want to say this really clear. 1 second. Let me fix this 1 second. I want to say something very clear about Corey Comparator, and something that I'm thoroughly disgusted with anyone who's going out there saying that this is some sort of fake assassination. Would you go up to Corey Comparator's wife and say it was fake? Would you go up to his daughter and say this was fake? Have some respect. You know, it's easy to just say anything on the internet, but I just want to urge people. I can't believe how many people are trying to push this narrative for political purposes to act like Trump and all this. You'd rather spend more time trying to believe that Trump and Republicans would go through all the trouble of making all this up. Having a man die protecting his wife and child from a shooter, shielding them and dying in the process, and 2 others got injured. It's just so disgusting and despicable that, come on, man, America, you're better than this. Democrats that are pushing this nonsense, you are better than this. At least I'd like to hope so, because together we are all Americans in this. So we need to get answers of what happened, because it affects everyone. We won't be able to protect the republic. We won't be able to protect representatives from both sides if this isn't figured out. We have serious problems and security threats in our institutions, and the Secret Service is one of them, where none of that is acceptable. It is a job where your job, you cannot fail. Anyway, well, I hope I was able to bring this hearing to you in a little bit quicker and edited way with a little bit of commentary. I appreciate all of you. If you like what you saw, of course, please like and subscribe. And also, you know, the video is also on Rumble. I always urge you to follow on Rumble as well, because you never know if YouTube, sometimes they try to censor people for the truth. So thank you very much, everybody. God bless.